time to learn how to use those manual controls on your camera phone. Hey guys, this is Abdullah, and I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. Have you ever captured an image and the image was too dark or too bright? This is where exposure compensation can help. It basically enables you to adjust the brightness of the image that you capture. Most modern smartphones implement HDR effects in order to balance between the details captured in the shadows of the image as well as the details in the bright areas of the image. But if you want to play around with the brightness yourself, here is how. Now this is the exposure compensation settings. So now you've got 0 exposure and the image is quite balanced. Look what happens when I gradually move the slider down and reduce the brightness in the image. You notice that the details in the tunnel are starting to become dark, but you're starting to see the details that are outside in the tunnel in the area that was too bright before. So you can do this for an artistic effect, light at the end of the tunnel kind of situation going on here. And when you push the brightness higher, look at what's happening. You're getting more details in the tunnel and losing all of the details outside. Sometimes you want to capture an image as quickly as possible, so you pretty much freeze the subject and don't end up with a blurry moving subject. Other times you might want to leave the camera open as much as possible so it captures more light, or if you want to create these really cool light trail effects or smooth water effects. This is what shutter speed is all about. It allows you to control how long the shutter speed remains open, and it's usually measured in seconds. The longer the shutter speed, the more light you'll be able to capture. But then you have to be careful because you also introduce blur into the image, since it requires very steady hands. And if you want to leave the shutter speed open for quite a long time, I would recommend using a tripod, as you'll definitely get the best results this way. But in handheld photo shooting sessions, finding the right balance is the right way. Also, if you're wondering why phones that have physical optical image stabilization can capture better low light images, it's actually because they can maintain a slightly longer shutter speed, so they capture more light. This is of course because OIS tries to minimize the shake that you usually have in your hands. So this is the shutter speed controls. You notice in auto, the phone will try and get a balanced image between just getting enough light and it being usable, on handheld without blur. But look what happens when you choose the quickest shutter speed. The camera takes the picture very quickly, so it freezes all the light. But as a result, there's barely any light that has been captured. And as you gradually increase the shutter speed, you're starting to get more light. And then eventually you'll end up getting very cool looking light trails, as you can see. So look at all these light trails left by the car's headlights and taillights. Now, in order to achieve this result, it's best to use a tripod. It's very tricky to get a stable image when you're using your hands and trying to do this. I usually don't go above 1/4 when I'm in handheld mode and I don't have a tripod, because I find that it gives the right balance between capturing enough light in low light as well as resulting in an image that isn't blurry. Just a quick reminder to go and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It really helps me grow and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Noise is a photographer's worst enemy. If you've captured an image and thought the image quality looks terrible because the picture looks grainy, then you've encountered noise. Now, what if I told you that you can actually control how much noise you want in an image? This is where light sensitivity, aka ISO, comes in. What it does is it actually controls how much light is artificially added to the image. But the caveat is, the more light that's artificially added, the more noise that will be introduced into the picture quality. The lower the ISO, the less light is added into the image, and the end result is a cleaner, higher quality picture. Now look at the ISO settings. In auto, the phone will try and balance between noise and light. But if you go with 100, for example, you'll get a very clean looking image that's a bit dark. And notice what happens when you gradually increase the ISO. you'll start to get a bit brighter and brighter and brighter. But you're also introducing a lot of noise into the image, and you can see this. Look at the details over here. There's a lot of grain now introduced in the image. You can also see it here at the top. So it's all about trying to find that right balance. I usually don't go over 800 because I feel like it's the sweet spot between light in the image and noise. Manual focus. Now this one shouldn't require too much of an explanation. It basically just gives you control on where your plane of focus in an image is. Whether you want the plane of focus to be as close as possible to the camera for macro images and a very cool bokeh effect, or you can set it to infinity where the horizon will be in full focus, and of course anything in between that. So yeah, that's basically what manual focus enables you to do. Now let's play around with the focus. So here you notice that the shell, the closest thing to the image, is in focus. And as I gradually move the slider up, you'll notice that the plane of focus is starting to shift upwards towards the horizon. And when you go all the way to the top, you notice now that background, the horizon is in focus while everything in the foreground is out of focus. So it gives you an infinite amount of balance between where you want the plane of focus to be. Now I don't usually play around with this. I usually tap on the subject that I want in focus. That still remains probably the best way to get focus on the thing that you want. But this gives you that extra granular fine control that you might sometimes need or require. Ever taken a picture that ended up looking a bit too blue or too yellow? Then you've definitely encountered white balance. White balance gives you a reading of the temperature of the light in the image, and it's usually measured in Kelvin. The lower the temperature, the more blue the white light will appear to look like. And the higher the temperature, the more yellow the image and the white light will look like. So the next time you think your phone got the white balance wrong, you can manually adjust this to fix that issue. Or you can use it to create an artistic effect. So this is the controls for the white balance. In auto, you'll try and get a white, neutral looking image. So the white light will look as white as possible. Now look what happens when you change it. See, this is high temperature. So the result is a yellow, orange looking image. And if you push it up, you're pushing it more towards the blue end of the spectrum, and notice how you're shifting towards more blue in the image. So sometimes, most of the time I would say the phone gets it right, but sometimes if you want that artistic effect, you can play around with this to get the desired result. You might notice that when you play around with some of these settings, specifically ISO, shutter speed, or exposure, the other two will also automatically adjust. This is where practice makes perfect, as these three settings are usually all combined to create how much light you want in an image. The key is to find the right balance between these three settings. What I usually do is I try to keep the ISO as low as possible, and the shutter speed, if I'm using the phone in handheld, no longer than 1/4. I also don't usually play around with the exposure or the white balance, as I'm always aiming, or most of the time aiming, for the cleanest possible image. But then again, you can get as creative as you want, and depending on the effect that you're trying to achieve, you can play around with whatever you really want. This is the beauty of using manual controls on your camera phones or professional cameras, because they allow you to get exactly the type of image that you want to produce, and it doesn't depend on what the phone's processing thinks is the best image. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility. Like sometimes when you're using the auto settings on your phone, you might capture a low light image that ends up looking too bright and it totally ruins the actual atmosphere of the image. Well, now you know how to fix this. Now I'd love to hear from you. What are your tips and tricks when you're using manual controls in order to get cool looking images? So please share them with us in the comments down below. That's it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.